Hello, it's Justin Kain with Team Real Vision, and today we're going to be talking about capitalization rate, or the cap rate. Now, I know there's a lot of confusion about this, but it's a very, very simple calculation, and it's a very powerful concept, because if somebody can get you to believe that the cap rate is lower than you think it is, you can be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars more for the property than if the cap rate is higher. So I want you to just remember that. That is the absolute most important thing. The most important concept about cap rate is the lower the cap rate goes, exponentially higher the price goes. And we're going to get into that here in just a few minutes. Okay, so let's talk about cap rate. Cap rate, I like to think of it as the capitalization rate or the return on my investment. So return on investment. Now, the reason that most commercial brokers and commercial lenders and even retail brokers and lenders don't use return on investment, or ROI, is because return on investment is specifically to the cash that you're putting into the deal. And most of the time when you're buying a commercial piece of real estate or any kind of commercial real estate, or you're measuring the return on your investment, you are not putting 100% cash into the project. So return on investment equals, or can also be known as a cash on cash return. So cash on cash return as opposed to return on investment or cap rate. So to investigate this concept of how much money am I making on the money that I've put into the investment, we have to think about how much income is the property generating, because nothing exists without income. So let's do a real quick, we'll erase this. Let's do a real quick and dirty version of how you make money in real estate. Okay, so you have income. Obviously, you have income because somebody is renting your property. Some person, some tenant, some company, somebody needs that property to do whatever they're going to do, whether they're living there, whether they're parking there if you're a parking lot, whether they're camping there if you're at a campsite, whatever. You got to have some form of rental income. And then you have your expenses. All right, so expenses can range anything from a very, very small amount of expenses. If you have a commercial triple net lease where the tenant is responsible for paying the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, all of those kind of things, that's called a triple net lease. But if you're in a residential property, you may be taking care of most of those expenses. If you own a piece of rental property and it's a single family home, generally you're going to be taking care of the insurance, you're going to be taking care of the taxes, the property taxes. You may be even taking care of some of the maintenance and some of the utilities, those kind of things. Certainly you're taking care of all of the deferred maintenance, or you're taking care of all of the capitalized improvements, such as fixing the roof, replacing the furnace, the water heater, those kind of things. But at the end of the day, you have income, you have expenses, and then you have what we call our NOI. It's a very important concept. Net operating income. Net operating income. Okay, so your net operating income is a specific number. Now, remember, we have not taken debt service out of net operating income. So if you say, well, my mortgage payment is $1,000 a month, that is below your net operating income. It doesn't come into your expenses. You may think of it as an expense, but the person who's measuring the cap rate doesn't think of it as an expense. So now we've gotten to our net operating income, and remember, it does not include your mortgage payment, because all we're dealing with is not, we're dealing with a theoretical basis of the value of the property. So if your net operating income on the property is $100,000 per year, okay, so you have a $100,000 NOI. All right, how we figure out cap rate is we divide the purchase price by the amount of the NOI. So we're going to divide this. If we've got $1 million purchase price, what is our cap rate going to be? Okay? So 1 million divided by 100,000 equals 10% or 10 cap. Okay? So for every dollar that we put in and then we purchased that piece of property, we're going to get a 10% cap rate. All right, so this is very, very important because the reason it's important is because most brokers, and I myself am a licensed real estate broker in Illinois, but most people don't think of it from the NOI standpoint to the purchase price standpoint. They start off with, well, what is the cap rate in the area? And that is a common question you'll hear. Well, what's the cap rate in the area? What's the cap rate in the area? And the cap rate in the area can vary very, all over the board. It could be all over the board depending on whether, some place is close to the lake. If you're in Chicago, is it close to the river? If you're in, a suburb with a nice river walk, is it close to a school? Is it close to the metro station? There's a lot of different factors that will affect this cap rate. But, and that's not even, not even to go into the factors that affect the NOI. So you're dealing with a lot of different factors here boiled down into a very simple number. So let's just take and say that this cap rate, say that somebody convinced you that this cap rate was not 10, it was only 5. Let's see what happens to our purchase price. Okay, we've got the same $100,000 worth of income, but we're going to say this is a 5% cap rate. Now, will our purchase price go up or down as our cap rate goes down? Okay, so we're going to do some simple math. We're still dividing 100,000 into a million, but now in order to get our 5% cap rate, this has to not be 1 million, it has to be $2 million. So now our purchase price just went from 1 million to $2 million just by moving the cap rate by 5%. And I want you to think about that because when we're measuring this, this is an exponential movement. So if we went from 5% down to let's say a 2.5% cap rate, and obviously there are not very many places that have a 2.5% cap rate, but if you're in New York or downtown Chicago, you might be dealing with this. A 2.5% cap rate. Remember, we're only moving the capitalization rate 2.5%. This is a very, very minuscule move. But if we move this down, how much do we have to increase the purchase price in order for us to have a 2.5% cap rate? Remember, the lower your cap rate goes, the higher your purchase price goes exponentially, not just a little bit. We have to go to a $4 million purchase price. A $4 million purchase price with a $100,000 NOI gives us a 2.5% cap rate. Now, let's work it the other way. Remember, at our $1 million purchase price, we had a 10% cap rate. So, if we go back to our 10% cap rate, we go back to our $1 million purchase price. So this is our $1 million purchase price up here. Now remember, we're only going to move the cap rate 5%, just like we did before. Okay, so we're going to add 5% onto this. Okay, so now our cap rate is 15. What does this do? What does this do to our purchase price? Well, what do we have to do? We have to figure out how many times does 100,000 go into, and it's going to be a lower number, go into, let me just erase this here. So 15% into 100,000. So if we divide our 100,000 by, and this is gonna, I want you to work this out because it's very, very important. If we divide our 100,000 by 15%, it's going to come out to a number. So if we divide $100,000 by 15%, it comes out to $666,666. Now, weird number, huh? That's because we've increased only by 5%, but that means that the purchase price drops by a third. Drops by a third. Now, let's see what happens as we go up. Now remember, if we went down, the purchase price would go up by $1 million, but when we go up, the purchase price only goes down by a third. And I think this is very, very important. So the lower you go, the more important the cap rate is. So let's go to 17.5% cap rate. I know this is kind of a ridiculous number, but let's just go to 17.5% cap rate and see what that does to our purchase price of this quote-unquote $1 million asset. All right. So I know that we needed a calculator here, and sometimes you gotta get really good with your calculator. But looking at a 17.5% cap rate, we're talking about the value of that asset going down to $571,000. So as the cap rate goes up, the purchase price goes down, and as the cap rate goes down, the purchase price goes up. So I want you to think about it like this. If the cap rate is going up, the purchase price is going down. Okay, so this is your cap rate, this is your purchase price. All right, so this is very, very important to remember, because if somebody says, well, this building has a 12 cap, well, you want to make sure that you're pushing the cap rate as high as possible, because you as the investor want a high cap rate. The seller wants the lowest cap rate possible, and they want to interest you in getting this. Now, we haven't covered any of what we're going to cover when we get into financing and what that can do to your cap rate of the amount of money that you're putting into the building, either a combination of your down payment plus your deferred maintenance. All of that goes into the basis of what you're calculating the building is worth. But this is just to get you into the mindset of, how do I figure out the cap rate, and how does my cap rate affect the commercial building? Thanks, everybody.